What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Millennials. Today, I have Jen Gray from Recharge. Super excited for this conversation. A true product marketer by trade, which is, we love talking to product marketers because they know how to just make things easier for everybody. And we're going to make a formula that Jen goes by at Recharge, way easier, broken down for you today. So, Jen, I just want you to introduce yourself. How did you get into marketing? And then we can talk about what we're going to talk about today.
Amazing. Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me. How I got into marketing. So I joined Qualtrics, which is like a tech company out of Utah. I think it was employee number 40. And it was because it shared a parking lot with the job that I had during college, which was like security systems. And I joined the company because they needed someone to scan accounts receivable receipts. And I was like, I can do that. I don't have a finance background, but yeah, for sure. And then when you join sort of a fast growing tech company, you kind of grow up with the company. And I carried so many roles and wore so many hats at Qualtrics, and then eventually found a home in marketing. Because they had an issue with sort of long tail of how do we sort of retain and engage through the entire customer journey on a one-to-many scale. And so that was when they were like, do you want to try marketing? And I said, sure, I'll figure it out.
That's always a good story where you just get thrown into a role. I feel like marketing is still that. Every company's different and you get thrown into a role and you just figure it out. Because even if you try bring a playbook from another company, you can kind of have a formula that you go by, but just every industry, every company, every way people operate, every product is so different that you just get thrown into a fire and it's just figure it out.
Some of the best marketers I think I've ever worked with didn't study marketing. I studied exercise science. I wanted to be a nurse. And I found my way into marketing and it stuck. But I think you're exactly right. I think understanding the rhythm and the uniqueness of each company is sort of like a marketer's charter, because coming in with a certain playbook doesn't always work out. And so I think you just have to find people that are very nimble. One of my favorite product marketing hires was a philosophy major, but he could communicate, he could storytell, he was wonderful. But I find that I love working with marketers with diverse backgrounds and unexpected backgrounds.
That's 100% true. I always say to myself, I wish I learned psychology in college. I wish I took that major instead of just going down. I was an entrepreneurship major, which has a little bit of marketing in it, but it was just, my mom was an entrepreneur. So I was like, okay, this is my path. I have to be an entrepreneur because my mom's an entrepreneur, but it just went down a random path and then figured it out. But I want to go into a topic you like talking about. It's routine economy. Could you explain what do you mean by the routine economy and then how you think about it in a somewhat formula?
Yeah, for sure. So Recharge does subscriptions for D2C brands, for e-commerce brands. And what we had found as we started looking into sort of consumer behavior was this evolution of our economy. And I think we started as a goods and services economy that was quickly commoditized. I mean, we know this. The internet was the greatest forcing function of commoditization. If you could instantly compare product to product, it meant that the entire societal zeitgeist cared about price because you could instantly compare. So it drove everyone down to the lowest common denominator. And so the goods and services economy was commoditized. Then as we see e-commerce brands evolving to the attention economy, because they built these incredible one-to-one relationships. This was the rise of D2C brands, was building one-to-one relationships with e-commerce brand or with their consumers, and then competing on digital platforms for their attention. And what we're now seeing is a new level of economic value, which is the routine economy. In order for e-commerce brands to stick around year over year, you have to figure out how to be embedded in the daily lives of your consumers. You will not survive by being a one-time wallet purchase. You have to figure out how that you own a piece of somebody's routine. And we go into all these things too about consumer behavior. I'm an elder millennial. I don't know. I'm on the older edge of millennials. And we start to really care about things like convenience and value because we're busy. Like millennials are now solidly in their sandwich era, which means that we're taking care of elderly parents. We're also trying to just like get enough water and protein in a day, just ourselves. And we're raising children. And so for me, my routine is like fucking important. Like I have to have my routine every day because I want to get all the things done. I have big dreams. And so the way we thought about this was like how to create a world in which routine was the most important thing for e-commerce brands and that would ensure their staying power day to day. And I think where we landed with the routine economy was just that, was like how do we sort of connect the dots from an emotional buyer's perspective as well as what the brands are trying to do, what sort of brands are promising to their consumers. If you think about all the e-commerce brands you work with every day or that you consume like I do, they promise things like better skin. They promise things like better hair, more energy in the morning, hitting your protein goal, like things that are so important that in order for you to hit that brand promise, you have to use that product over and over and over again. And so that's where we kind of found this emotional connection of routine to connect to brands' goals.
Yeah, and those are, I mean, the companies that we're talking about are the typical subscription e-commerce ones. They also obviously are the expensive one-off purchases, but how they sustain is adding more SKUs. For
Yeah.
example, Hexclad, they have their pots and pans, but then they add their salt shaker, and then they add the apron, and they add a whole mix of things that aren't really subscription-based stuff, but it rounds out your kitchen. And then there's the other side of it where, hey, I had like Ari has a Vegamore prescription, so she
Yeah.
gets a like monthly gets Vegamore delivered to the house, and that's something that she really cherishes in her routine. So that totally makes sense of the routine also being part of someone's daily life and someone remembering that every single day, because every single day you have to take that product to sustain whatever goals you're trying to sustain. So
You hit on something so fascinating there too, because I think what we're finding is like 10 years ago, tech started to diversify their products. Like tech would start as sort of one thing for one type of customer. Like Qualtrics was surveys for market research professionals and academics. I peddled dental software at one point where it was like appointment reminders for dental offices. And what we found like 10 plus years ago were that tech companies, in order to increase their TAM and how long they would be around, they did product diversification. They added more SKUs, I guess, in econ language. And they started eating up more pieces of the workflow so that they could have a larger TAM, demand a larger price, and have a better retention strategy. And it's fascinating to me now that we're seeing these brands tap into routine, like you said, that may not be a replenishable, but it is a brand that, like, Canopy, for example, does humidifiers and shower heads. But then they started doing filters and like essential oils as you go to bed, like things that were a replenishable. Casper, I think, is my favorite example of this. Casper was mattresses, right? They started as mattresses, but like the category of sort of mattresses wasn't quite as sexy and not really part of an everyday like buyer's routine. So they evolved to a sleep company. That was their category, was sleep. And all of a sudden, they developed like glow lights as you go to bed. They developed like a pet bed. They developed like cooling sheets, like things that could be replenishable as part of a routine just because they thought differently about their category.
and I think they had to start thinking differently, because I think at that time they realized you can sell as many beds as you can to as many people, but beds in general have a 5 to 10 year life. So you're not going to get that customer unless they refer a friend to buy another bed. So you have to now think about, okay, what are the next phase where I can get people to come back and remember me for the next 5 years until they need another expensive bed to replace that with. So it's smart, but I think every brand has to do that now because you said before, like attention was easier to Casper started beds, but now and we're going to talk about this in a second, but now the category of beds got Eight Sleep, got Avocado, got all these different brands that are you can sleep with, so like have sleep. So they had to figure out other products to stay relevant for a longer period of time. Like Eight Sleep's so smart because they have their bed, but they have a subscription on the app that you have to pay monthly to keep that all the cool stats you get on your app to keep going. So I think that's such a smart play. But I want to talk about this because in the routine economy, now that we're in the routine economy, you have to do something of creating a category, which is your formula. I think this category, and then it goes down to product positioning, and then it goes down to brand story. So do you want to break that down high level, and then we can go dive deep into each phase of those three?
So if it hasn't been obvious yet, I am a product marketer. I never was going to be like, I smell a product marketer. But this has been an interesting framework that I've seen play out at every company that I've been at and actually applies kind of B2B and also B2C is I've never worked for a company and not been asked the question, should we category create? Right? Like, should we category create? Qualtrics was the best example of this. They were literally surveys, just surveys. Like, they weren't any better than SurveyMonkey, but they nailed their category by category creating. Instead of competing in that same category, right? Like Eight Sleep, instead of competing against another mattress company, they were like, we're going to be, Smart Sleep or what have you. Or Casper was like, we're not going to be a mattress company. We're going to be a sleep company. And so Qualtrics went through this where they adjusted from being in a survey software category and they created experience management. That was their whole thing. XM now is like kind of plastered everywhere. And it was this idea of managing the experience that a brand gives to a consumer and making sure that that matches up with what the consumer is actually experiencing. And I find this fascinating. So high level, it's like figuring out what your category is, like whether it's like you need to just be the best in your existing category, or do you need to create a new category? Then getting crystal clear on what your product positioning is, which we can talk about in a second. And then figuring out how to create this buzz to make sure that you're the only solution that will work. Right? Qualtrics did this by talking about the experience gap. Right? They said there was a gap between the experience that you're giving to your consumers and then their survey results. There's a gap. And how do you bridge that gap? And all of a sudden, people stopped thinking about surveys and tools and features and price, right? They started thinking about value. They started thinking about what this company could do to elevate them as CX professionals or market research professionals, and how that could completely transform the delivery of their customer experience, their brand experience, their product experience. So that's the framework I think everybody goes through. And to be fair, I don't think everyone should category create. I think that's such an easy buzzword to talk about, but I think there's time and a place for both.
Yeah, and I think one thing that people don't add into that formula that I see that I think Qualtrics did that SurveyMonkey didn't do, which got harder for SurveyMonkey, is they started up market and they didn't do the PLG motion, which is a big decision too, is how we're going to go to market with the product. And I think it became so hard because 30 people in a company could have a SurveyMonkey account, and it could be disparate and free and all this stuff, where you go to market as, let's say, a sales-led motion or a different motion, and they can get 100 accounts and it's not one-off, because it's harder to go. And I've seen this at other companies that it's easier to go down market than up market, because up market's way harder to go because you have to package the product differently, but you can always like strip away a product easily. But going the other way is so hard to get from PLG to enterprise, especially when all these people are creating multiple accounts and everybody's everywhere. And you have to figure out the back end to that and figure out how to position. Now selling it to a company, it becomes all tricky. But I want to go into every category. So first of all, like if I was, you when it came into Recharge, and you've seen this in many companies, how do you start thinking about the first, like, I want to create a category? How should people think about that? How should marketers think about that?
There's a couple of questions I think you got to ask yourself first. Are you the category queen, or who is the category queen? So Recharge does subscriptions. There's tons of providers of subscriptions for Shopify apps, but Recharge is by far the category queen. Like, we have 20,000 brands. It's more than any competitors combined. Like, why category create when you already own the category? Right? So thinking about, if you are competing with somebody who is already like the incumbent, the established company that does what you do, can you effectively and simply say why you're different? If you can very quickly and easily explain why you're different and why that's a different value prop, or I don't think that you necessarily need to category create. Because, like, I will just be honest, category creation is expensive. It's hard. It takes so much time, because you're kind of, and you just destroy your SEO and destroy your organic search terms. So it's risky. It's a big bet. I think Qualtrics, the agency they used, Play Bigger, I think they charge like $2 million. Like, it's so expensive. So for me, I'm always like, okay, what are some steps that you can take? So if you're thinking about category creation, it's like, who is the category queen? Are you differentiated enough, or are you going to just have to kind of battle feature to feature? Are you just going to have to be like, well, our feature is better than so-and-so's feature, and this feature is better than this feature, and this has a couple more doodads than this feature? If that's the battle that you're in, you're going to lose. You're going to lose every day. So that's maybe a time for you to consider whether you should category create.
And I think two things I'd add to that is, like, category creation, one, it's also hard because you're marketing a category that also could bring in other people. So it's you're bringing up a whole category. You're not necessarily only marketing a product. So that could enter, which is also a good thing. I think people should still market their category, and that's something people don't do very well. If your category isn't a big category,
Agreed.
you should be marketing your category to bring that awareness to that, whatever you're trying to do. But also just know that it's going to bring more competitors into that category, and because you're bringing more attention to a category that was not prominent or didn't exist or is new. So it will bring in more competitors when you start category creating, per se.
If you search experience management, all of those players are using that same term. Like, and that's another thing too, is when you talk to legal about like trademarking these things, it's not quite as easy as you think. And so you do run that risk of like, I'm going to category create and it's going to be good. And if it's good, other people are going to latch on too. So you face a couple of different challenges. But I think in my mind, I'm definitely pro product positioning over category creation. Like, go through the exercise with your leadership team, go through the exercise of figuring out, should you category create or not? And then what kind of incremental improvements can you get just by doing better product positioning?
So let's go into that, because I know category creation is like the highest of high thing you could do. And then the second is position your product. So what are those few, I know there's a whole thing exercise you can go for product positioning, but what are a couple of things people should think about when positioning their product in the market?
I try to keep mine simple, because you're absolutely right. There's so many frameworks of like jobs to be done or value or consumption. Like, there's so many ways to think about product positioning, but I simplify it down to, are you telling people what you do, or are you telling people what you do for them? I'll give you an example that I love, and product positioning I could fangirl about all the time. As you start to notice the brands that you work with or the companies you work with, everyone has product positioning. Like, REI has product positioning, Chomps has product positioning, where they have Chomps and they have Chomplings. Like, that's product positioning, is how you kind of label your products in the hierarchy. My favorite example is Lululemon. So if you go to Lululemon, which I do often, and you go to their dropdown, you can search women's clothing, and you can search things like leggings, sports bras, t-shirts. And this is great, but it assumes that I know what I'm looking for as a consumer. And Lululemon knows that and knows that I'm looking for leggings. I'm looking for leggings. They're fine. But when you do product positioning based off of what you offer, like leggings, you then have to get into a feature battle with other providers. So like Lululemon has to spend time thinking about and explaining why their fabrics are better. Right. So when you go to their drop down, you see there's Align, there's Wonder Train, there's all these different fabrics that they do because they're competing with you for leggings. But it makes it hard for me to see myself in that product. So shifting to what you do for the consumer or what you do for the buyer, down at the bottom of their drop down, they have based on activity. You can search based off of yoga or travel or tennis. They should add pickleball, truly. I think Lululemon really needs to get on the pickleball train. But that's sort of the pivot between shifting what you do and what you're providing and what tools you're giving people versus what you're solving for them.
I actually went through this exercise today because I was looking. I recently got into tennis. One of my favorite tennis players like reps on Cloud. So I was like looking if OnCloud dropped like a Wimbledon line like for tennis. So I went like on there and I didn't search for like shirts or stuff like that. I was like, I went to tennis and I was like, okay, what are there any like white t-shirts or shorts that they drop for that thing? It helped me go into my category of I'm a tennis player. I want tennis wear. I think that's so smart. I also think one of the best brand positionings they did too, Lululemon, because I think I started wearing athleisure at work before athleisure was cool for like guys to wear athleisure at work, just because of comfort wear. But I love how they position
Yeah.
their sales as like made too much, like which is so smart because it's like just like simple words, but it's just they don't say like our product's on sale to cheapen the product. They say, oh, we made too much of these. We want to give it a discount of this. So I think that's also an interesting way to like reposition another, which is technically a category of clothes that they have, which is clothes on sale, has made too much of this, which is, I thought, a smart thing to do. But I think that first they could just compete on leggings because they were like the one or two brands. But now everybody's getting into leggings. Everybody's getting into pickleball.
Yeah.
Everybody's getting into tennis. So now, but some of those things could be worn on tennis, running, like, which is also good. So you can cross promote SKUs and just maybe change a word. Like it could be like the same item and say tennis leggings, and then you have leggings that are meant for tennis, which is super smart as well. Is there any other things we want to dive deep in on product positioning that you think companies should think about when positioning their product? And I know famously Steve Jobs says we don't want to compete on fees and speeds. We want to compete on feelings and benefits. So I think, are there anything else like how, as like a software company, since everybody, let's say 80%, I'm just throwing out a number, is competing on features. If you go to most sites, it's a feature battle. How do you think about not doing that and kind of going a different route and making sure it's more benefit driven?
So one of the first calls I was on when I joined Recharge, I'm about 9 months in at this point, was somebody asking me about the feature race. They were like, okay, there's tons of subscription providers. Everyone's going, just so fast to innovate and build new products. And I was like, okay, if we've gotten into a feature race, then we need to redo our product positioning. And I'll get really granular with Recharge as an example. So when I first joined, Recharge went multi-product, and their products were, let's see if I can remember, it was bundles, subscriptions, flows, and loyalty, I think were the four, were their products. You go to their website, but again, that was very much what they do, not what they do for you. And it also meant that people were instantly comparing us to another loyalty solution or another bundles. And you quickly got into a feature race. But you have to remember, we as buyers, even on the consumer side or on the software buying side, we're emotional. Like you said, we want to buy value. We want to buy hope in the future and what this software is promising me. And so we went through this exercise and we positioned our products as, okay, the core of what we're going to do is always going to be subscriptions. So the core product is subscription management, smart subscription management. So how do we build in like AI and personalization and A/B testing and things? The next layer out from there was like, okay, what can we do differently that none of our competitors can claim? It was 20,000 brands. It was insights and learnings from 20,000 brands that we've seen succeed and not succeed in our lifetime as a company. And so the next layer of products was data and insights. Like, how can we ensure that your subscription strategy is smart and is learning as quick as you are gaining new customers and new subscribers? And then the next layer out from there was the subscriber lifecycle. Was how do we engage your subscribers through conversion, retention, and growth? Because we knew for sure that those were three things that subscription, like retention managers and e-commerce managers, were being asked. What does conversion look like? What does retention look like? What does growing and increasing the AOV of your subscribers look like? And so we mapped our product to their goals, to the questions that they're asked from their leadership team, to make it easier for people to see their problems in Recharge. Instead of saying like, oh, Recharge does lots of features, it was like, Recharge solves problems for me. They answer questions for me. They make my subscribers, more engaged through the entire life cycle. So that was kind of the exercise we went to. You have to tap into a little bit of emotion. And what we all do at corporate jobs, like we have to reach goals. We have to submit our board decks. We have to report on our metrics. And how can you tap into that in your product positioning?
I think one thing you also said that was great is you already knew the benefit of subscription and smart subscription, but you took something that already was in the company that not many people had, which was those customers, and you use the customers as the hero, the analytics, what you're learning from them. It's something you didn't have to go outside and invent something else to do this. You took something that already existed in your arsenal to talk about that. I think that's a smart move. And I also think you did it at a right time where there was a rise of the job title lifecycle marketing retention. I don't think like 10 years ago that was like, I think, called an email marketer. And now like email marketers are bunched into retention marketing and lifecycle marketing. It's not just email marketing manager or an email marketing manager is on the team of the lifecycle team. But I don't think that even that category of marketing was known 10 years ago. It might have just started a little bit, but now there's a whole category. So you have to match your product to the job function of what those people are doing, which is retaining people, making sure they're coming back, making sure you're journey mapping the customer life cycle. And that job has just expanded from what it was 10 years ago. So it's smart to align your product to what that person's job description is aligned to. So I think that's super smart.
You nailed it.
I also want to go into the last part because I think this is actually one of the biggest more brand differentiator, but it could also differentiate the product is the company story, the brand story. So how do you weave that into everything you're just talking about, or how do you think about having a brand story that's different than your competitors?
This one's a little bit less frameworked out. And I'm glad you talked about sort of the rise of the lifecycle marketer. So once you figure out what category you're playing in and your product positioning, you then have to create a world in which you are the only solution that will work. That's marketing, that's brand marketing, that's the company story, that's your content strategy. And so for Qualtrics, it was the experience gap. And you can go back and watch clips of the CEO, Ryan Smith. Every single interview he was on, he talked about the experience gap. Like he would just sort of be like, yeah, the experience gap. And to some point, it was kind of like, stop making that a thing. Like, stop trying to make it a thing. It's not a thing. They made it a thing because they just kept talking about it. At Recharge, where we landed was the routine economy. And I guess the best formula I can lay out here is your story has to be at the Venn diagram, like the center of the Venn diagram of what's happening in society, what's happening out in sort of the broader industry. So for Recharge, it was millennials have majority purchasing power now, and they're crazy anxious and they're crazy busy, and they have a lot of money to spend to elevate their everyday. So that was like, from a societal standpoint, that's where we came from. Then it was like, okay, well, what do you do as a product, right? We do retention and growth. And then the last piece is what your buyers are concerned about. And so for us, it was like, okay, how do we elevate the retention marketers, the life cycle marketers, the people that are getting asked these hard e-commerce questions about the business, because it's hard right now for e-commerce brands. So we kind of took those three chunks and landed on the routine economy. And it was this sort of aspirational, more value driven, more consumer insights than just selling your solution. And I'll be really honest, Recharge did that a lot. We just went out and we're like, okay, here's why our features are better. Here's why our dashboards are better. But it didn't quite resonate with buyers. And so we had to land on this topic that would provide value for merchants, that was about tapping into the routine economy, understanding your buyer, understanding your ideal customer profile, and also acknowledging what's happening in the world, why it's so hard for e-commerce brands, why acquisition costs are so high, and why you need to then focus on retention. So that was kind of our framework of figuring out what that brand story could be, so that once somebody was bought into the routine economy, they're like, oh, well, of course, Recharge's tools help me be part of somebody's routine. So that's an easy decision for me to make.
Yeah, and I think that's really smart because the brand story was less about, hey, I was this e-commerce founder back in the day, and then I had this problem, and then that's why I started Recharge. It's more like a story which your customers could resonate in what their companies actually are, and it's a framework that they can think about and digest in a simpler way. Yeah, we are trying to be part of this routine, and yeah, CACs are going up, ROAS is going up, spend is going up, and we're asked to retain more and more customers. And how do we do that in a smart, insightful way where we're basically, I mean, the term that SaaS brands have used for a long time, like how do we become that like sticky product in their life that they come back more and more, and adding your layer of what you said before, adding insights from 20,000 brands that are doing it right now, and we can say, okay, this is working for this category, this isn't working for this category. Hey, maybe you're selling to the wrong ICP, maybe you're bundling your product wrong, maybe you're upselling the wrong thing here. Like, you can use insights now to think about how to retain. I feel like marketers always knew that retention was so important, but in the age of growth without any care, yeah, all
Without
costs,
costs. Yeah.
we marketers just started thinking about, how do we just load the funnel? How do we load the funnel? I don't care who's in the funnel, just get people in and we'll figure it out. And the companies that are using things like Recharge or using products that retain, and now marketers, that's become more and more part of a marketer's scope, where before you thought about marketing just till, which you shouldn't have, but marketers just stopped at the sale, and then customer success was really responsible for retention. Now a marketer has to think about, how do we remarket? How do we upsell over there? How do we cross sell post purchase? How do we keep them excited? How do we send them things that they're happy about? So super smart that you positioned the brand story around the customer. And I think a lot of people which you can do if you have a great brand story, that people will resonate with. But if you don't have that deep story, for example, at Service Titan, we had the founders, they created the product for their dad, who was a service person. So it was easy to tell the story that this product was created for these people, for their dad. They were trying to solve a problem that wasn't in the market. People were using pens and papers, and we're trying to be the anti like pens and papers and make your business more efficient. But we can start from the founder story. But if you don't have a good founder story, you can come up with a new framework like the routine economy.
And you touched on, I think, also the secret sauce that I think makes this so much better is if you can figure out how to elevate your buyer in the company, you've kind of struck gold. Like Qualtrics, I think, did this kind of unexpectedly, where they sold to market research professionals who, like, they weren't the heroes in any company. It's just sort of like the consumer insights people kind of in the back room. Suddenly, market research professionals were owning the entire consumer experience. Suddenly they were getting promoted to be like chief experience officers, right? I think Gainsight also did a great job with this. Customer success managers were kind of like lowly, and then all of a sudden they got elevated in the whole company to be sort of like the heroes of all the information about their consumers or their buyers. Like they were elevated across the company. And I think, Recharge is starting on that same path where retention marketers are being asked hard questions and they're being held to some high standards. How can we elevate them to be the experts, to know the most about their most loyal customers that can then feed their consumer omni-channel strategy? I think that's so fascinating, is that we're seeing retention marketers and what they're learning about their subscribers and what their favorite products are and where they're located and what their behavior is like and whether they're bargain hunters will then dictate an omni-channel strategy for CPG brands that are trying to go to Whole Foods and Target, where we're elevating this persona. And I think if you can sort of nail your category, your product positioning, your brand story, and elevate a buyer, that's kind of gold, and you figured it out.
I mean, that's what HubSpot did as well with just their content marketing strategy, but that's a strategy they went to market with. And if you can make someone better at their job or help them seem more valuable in their company or help them get promoted, you have a very great product, because one, they'll be the biggest advocate in the company to buy that product. And two, if you're helping them do more insightful stuff that drives revenue, which that's what every company really cares about at the end of the day, is revenue. So if you help keep that revenue and churn, those are the only, if you're a subscription company, if you can lower churn and keep revenue, you're going to be seen as one of the most valuable people in the company. And then if you have data to back it up, which everybody wants data, you definitely now can go and tell a story internally to your CMO, to your leaders, that, hey, this is the results we're doing. So super smart. Last question I have for you that I like to ask everybody in this podcast is, what is a marketing hill you would die on?
Oh, there are so many. I think a marketing hill that I would die on is that I think your first marketing hire should be a product marketer.
I mean, that is definitely a hill to die on. I think that's great. I think, I mean,
Dan's like, that's a take.
I do think, like, I think product marketing needs like a rebrand and name for some reason, because product marketers are actually,
I agree,
deep strategists and more than product and marketing. That's the hidden insight that people don't get, is because before you start anything, you have to know your ICP, position your product, package your product, figure out the market, figure out how you're going to go to market. And then you can hire someone. You can't hire a growth person if you haven't figured out those things. So
totally. And many companies do. Many companies build entire growth functions and content functions without product marketing. And then you're having to see them hire product marketing to kind of rebuild the foundation, which is hard. It's hard and time
Yeah,
consuming.
because you have to really go in there and say, actually, we've been selling to this category, this group of people that aren't actually don't care about our product at all. And you've been wasting time here. And it's a hard conversation to have to someone who spent a lot of money to do that. So I just think that product marketing is just so misunderstood. I think the companies that get it, get it. I think a lot of companies don't understand what product marketers do. One of my best friends is a product marketer, and she always says that like product marketing isn't even like truly fully marketing because it's like deep strategy and market research and all these things that help a business. It's more like a chief strategy officer than a chief marketing officer, and the future CEOs, not the future CMOs. So it's like, because those are just such a critical skill to learn. So that's a great hill to die on. I think a lot of great CMOs have come up from product marketing because it's telling product positioning is so key for every company that most people who aren't succeeding aren't nailing down right now. So,
I think especially because we're seeing so many companies that come up from product-led founders. Like that would be my other piece is like, I think product marketing should be your first hire, especially if you have a very product-led founder, because translating sort of what the product is building and where it's building to, I think is such an important piece of your scaffolding.
yeah, because when I used to hear about product marketing, let's say 8, 9 years ago, I always thought it was, oh, these people who just when the product is made, they come up with the launch strategy and come on how to communicate it to the company, and that was it. But now I've got deeper into marketing, and I've seen like actually product marketing just defines everything you do as a marketing strategy. And if you don't have it, it's actually you're just basically shooting darts in the dark and hoping it hits a target. So I definitely on board with product marketers, and I'm one of those people who at first didn't see the value because I was the young, innocent marketer, but now just can't live with a lot of the product marketers. So shout out to product marketers out there.
Shout out to product marketers.
Lastly, where can people find you, what you're doing, and all that fun stuff?
Yeah, so I'm to varying levels engaged on LinkedIn. So find me on LinkedIn. It's Jen L. Gray. I actually started my own podcast. It's called The Corporate Cleanse. It was kind of like a flash in the pan. I'm trying to figure out if I want to start it back up again. Find me on Instagram. I'm not on Twitter. I know that's a little bit crazy, but I'm not.
I think
And I do not really understand.
Sometimes you're
What?
not missing out a lot on Twitter, and sometimes there's echo chambers on Twitter. I love Twitter, but sometimes you feel like you're in another world, and then you get into like another social platform. You're like, there's a whole other world out there. That wasn't Twitter, so it's fun.
It feels scary whenever I step my toe in there. I'm like, what's this? What's happening over here?
If you're not in it a lot, it's hard to be active on it because you have to understand it's just so real time that you just have to like consume so much.
It's not part of my routine.
Exactly. Elon needs to position this as how could Twitter be part of your daily routine? Um,
We'll tweet at him.
Maybe it's your daily real-time news, which Twitter was a long time ago. Now it's become, I don't even know, like Elon said it best today, I think, a world group chat. I think it feels like a group chat of everybody speaking.
Yeah.
So
Like the most chaotic group chat
exactly.
that you can't keep up with. Like things just keep coming in and you can't respond in time.
Exactly. So follow you. You're on other platforms, not Twitter, which is probably smart. And yeah, look up Recharge if you're in e-commerce and subscription. Probably most people listening who are in e-commerce and have a subscription are using Recharge, but if you're not, go check them out. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me. This was a blast. Thank you.